Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Data Dojo. I'm very lucky to have Patricia Moore with me. I'm lucky to have worked with her in some small capacity at Boomi, and I've seen her grow in her career in the short time I've known her. She's a manager currently. She recently got promoted, and she's part of the Movie Innovation Group, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But Patricia, what really excites me is looking at your career trajectory. It's kind of unconventional. Like you've pivoted from music and you've had like a couple of other small business venture and communication. And you've pivoted a lot and you've done a bunch of random things. And finally, you found your ground with Boomi and in AI. So very lucky to have you on this podcast and very lucky to be working with you in Boomi. So thank you for taking the time out and talking with us. And why don't you tell us more about what you do and kind of give us an overview of your unconventional journey?
Sure. Thanks for having me. This is super exciting. It has been great getting to work with you as well on the patent committee and on other things. Always learning. So right now, like you said, I work for the Boomi Innovation Group. I am the senior manager of innovation programs. And so
Mm,
a lot of what I do is helping the rest of the business understand these solutions and assets that are coming out of our team. We have some really great architects that build solutions
mm,
in the Boomi platform. And so just making sure that our sales team is aware of the things that we are putting out that they can put in front of customers, working with marketing to make sure that they have the
mm,
right assets that they need to talk about the solutions that we've built, but also bringing information back to the team, right? Are we building the right solutions that are going to help our customers get the outcomes they're looking for? Um, some of that is also thinking about what is coming, right? So looking at
mm,
some of the research some of my colleagues are doing and how do we apply that research, specifically in AI, to
mhm,
creating solutions that customers aren't even asking for yet, right? So we
mm.
want to be ahead of the curve so that
Right.
when they are coming back and saying, we're interested in AI agents, if you will, we are
Mhm,
already ready. We have frameworks that we can set them
mhm,
up with and things that we can send their way to get them educated on things they need to know to be successful in their AI endeavors
right.
using Boomi. So that's sort of what I do today. My career to get here was very unconventional.
Right.
So I went to undergrad for music business and
Mm,
I worked in the music industry for probably 4.5 years doing logistics and marketing for concerts and live music events. So that could be music
mm.
festivals. I worked for some jazz cruises for a while in
Wow.
Manhattan. Um,
Yeah.
so did some pretty fun things, got burnt
Mm,
out
mm.
very quickly. It is a
Yeah.
lot of long hours. The pay is
Mm,
not always great, but it is a lot of fun.
mm,
So when I finished doing that, I actually moved overseas to Malaysia. That's where my mom is from. So I
mhm.
did a small stint as a resort bartender and sort of had an
Wow.
eat, pray, love moment. And when I came back to the States, I applied to business school. So I was like, okay, I'm going to
Mm,
go back to school and figure out what is
mm.
next if I don't want to work in the industry.
Right.
And from there, I actually wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my MBA. So I went to the University of Texas at Austin. They are very
Mm,
well known for their
right.
work in entrepreneurship. So I took some
Mm,
design thinking classes, some entrepreneurship classes. I had actually started a nonprofit while I was in undergrad. So alongside
mm,
working in the music industry, I also was running this nonprofit that worked in elementary education. And so coming out of business school, I started my own business. Know how it
wow.
started a
Mm,
business doing tea pairing, which is super niche. So if you wanted to throw a
wow.
tea party with your girlfriends or with your kids or with your guy friends,
Mm,
you could hire my company to come and set up tea for you. And so I was doing that. I was working full time for a nonprofit as a director because the business wasn't paying what I needed it
mm,
to pay my bills.
right.
And so did that for about 3 years and then ended up closing the tea party business. Couldn't figure out a way to scale it to quit my
Mm,
job, which was really the goal. I did it for 3 years and finally was like, I'm not really sure what we're doing here.
yeah.
So after I closed the business, I actually was approached by Virginia Commonwealth University to teach as an adjunct professor. So still
Mm,
working my full-time job in nonprofit, also teaching this course. The course was on product innovation. And so
mm,
that really came out of my past experience as an entrepreneur and then bringing in some folks that I was connected to through business school or other means. Really enjoyed that. And that's how I ended up at Boomi. So someone
wow.
who lived in Richmond, who went to my church actually,
Mm,
heard that I was teaching this class in product innovation and was like, tell me more. And through a series of conversations, which started as they were looking at how they might recruit students from the program I was teaching in to work at
mm,
Boomi,
Right.
turned into, would you like to work at Boomi?
Mm.
You clearly understand product, you clearly understand how to solve problems, and
Right.
we would love to figure out how we could utilize your skills for our company.
Mm.
And here we are. So
Awesome. Awesome. Wow. That's quite a journey and very interesting one. I remember during my master's degree, I was doing a master's in, it's called Integrated Innovation for Products and Services. But I ended up taking a lot of machine learning courses within that. That's a different story. But when I was doing that master's, I had conversations with people like, what's your master's in? I would say, well, it's product and innovation and design and engineering. And it was so hard to explain, but I could really see the value of it actually when I started working full time. I'm like, okay, I know a lot about product. I know a lot about design thinking. I know a lot about, of course, my core engineering, and it really helps me. And kind of look, listening to your story, you've known product, you've done entrepreneurship, you've done these different things which kind of gave you a product mindset, but also because you've been in the creative industry with music business, that part as well. And now with Boomi, you've kind of getting yourself gripped with AI and engineering. So you've had that holistic experience which helps you do well at your job, which not a lot of people understand and the value of it. So yeah, thank you for sharing that story.
thank you for helping point that out, because it is hard to sort of like tell that story in a cohesive way, right? Like people look at
Mm,
my resume and they're always like, how did you get
yeah.
to where you are? And a lot of times I just tell them, just being open to opportunity, right? When somebody comes and asks you,
Mm,
would you be interested in doing this thing, before you
mm,
rush to say no, or before you rush to say yes, before you
yeah.
rush to say anything, sort of just
Mm,
understanding like, what is the opportunity and what could that lead to?
mm,
Because the opportunities for my career now look very different than they did before I came into this role. Like this
right.
has opened up so many doors of opportunity for me. And that's
Mm,
really what I wanted. Like leaving my last job, I was looking around. At that time, I was doing marketing and programming for a nonprofit that did leadership
mm,
development. And I loved the job and I loved the organization, but there was no room for growth. It was a very small
mm,
nonprofit. And so
right.
I thought to myself, like, what's next? Do I want to work in marketing? Do I want to
Mm,
do programming? Do I want to do logistics for some other industry or
right.
operations? And so this kind of came at a really good time and has been
Mm.
more than I ever dreamt it could be.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen your growth and I've chatted with you a couple of times, like, hey, what's a typical day in your job? And you had like really interesting answers, which is why I want to pivot and ask a little bit more about. You briefly mentioned that at Innovation, Boomi Innovation Group, you're leading the innovations program and you're kind of figuring out, trying to stay ahead of the curve and finding things that customers may want. And your team is kind of building that stuff, and you already have it, maybe AI agents or things of that sort. But tell us a little bit more, if you could dive deep into any one example project, like how is the entire process? Do you have somebody who's researching what is the latest buzzwords, or what's other people or competitors in our space doing, and trying to stay ahead of the curve by building POCs? Like walk us through a little bit of deep dive of, maybe use an example of AI agents or something.
Oh goodness. It always looks different. There is no set process for how these things work, but I guess a good example might be retrieval augmented generation.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my colleagues was really working hard on understanding how LLMs work and
Right.
what are the pros and the cons, right? Like what are the drawbacks of trying to put something like this into production for your
Mm-hmm.
company? Because there were so many warnings, and there
Yeah.
still are so many warnings that we need to pay attention to
Yeah.
about using artificial intelligence in your processes
Mm-hmm.
and relying on them to give you good data. Like we've
Mm-hmm.
all seen these LLMs hallucinate time after
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And so the problem he was trying to solve is, how do you get less? And so I was watching him sort of go through these iterations, and then
Mm-hmm.
he sort of stumbled upon retrieval augmented generation in
Mm-hmm.
sort of trying to understand the landscape and what was happening. And so he built an example of how we might do that with Boomi. And so
Mm-hmm.
while that was happening, another one of my colleagues who does more academic research was starting to
Mm-hmm.
hear all of this chatter happening in his more academic circles around RAG. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm saying to myself, this is not just in a silo, this is actually happening out in industry. So
Right.
then how do we take that and give it to our sales team and put it in front of our customers and make it relevant? And
Mm-hmm.
so I got with another person on our team, right? Like try to include as many people as you can to really
Right.
understand the technology, to say, how can we build an example through a workshop that would sort of teach people
Mm-hmm.
the value of what is being built here? And so we had these conversations internally with our team. I went to our marketing team and was trying to understand, like, is the market ready for this kind of information? And
Mm.
in the course of having these conversations, someone from product marketing said, why don't we try doing this workshop with customers at Boomi World, like at our next customer
Right.
conference?
Mm.
And so that's what we did. We built this workshop. We sort of tested it with some of our internal people. We pulled in some people from pre-sales and some people from PSO, our implementation department, and said, can you all sort of walk through this workshop with us and help us understand if you find the value in what's happening here? And once we
Mm-hmm.
sort of worked out the kinks, we ran the workshop at Boomi World. And that has sort of now taken on legs of its own, right? So
Yeah.
we're running that same workshop with our interns coming up so that they can sort of learn not just to build with Boomi, but to build things that are a bit more cutting edge with our platform.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just continues to grow. So there are processes in the works right now to get that workshop into a demo instance for our salespeople to then go out and showcase it. They might not necessarily run the whole workshop,
Mm-hmm.
but we were able to get some ideas from customers at Boomi World as we're doing this workshop. We're asking customers, how do you see this working for your business? Like, what are some use cases that make
Mm-hmm.
sense for what we're doing here? Because we put it through as an automotive industry
Right.
example, and they were able to come back and say, oh yeah, we could totally see that the type of data we would be holding would be this, and this would
Right.
be the end user, and these are the type of questions they would be asking.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was super, super valuable. So that obviously Boomi World happens once a year. That's not how we're
Yeah.
doing all of our innovation
Right.
processes, but that's like one example of how we're
Mm.
sort of taking the sort of testing and iteration and then figuring out how do you actually turn this into a business use case or something of
Right.
value that we can then sell to customers.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Wow. That sounds amazing. And like you mentioned, seems like you're interacting a lot with customers and trying to understand their pain points. And while you're building these quick POCs and really cool stuff, I want to understand, like, are there any sort of challenges? Because you build really great stuff, but the AI adoption is still not as fast paced. And there could be different reasons, like maybe the customers think they want something, but they're not actually ready to use it, or the system and trying to put anything in production is actually way more complicated. Like with generative AI, it's of course easier to build stuff faster than ever, but the question still is, how do we scale it, how do we productionize it? That still is a gap, and that still is not as fast as one would expect. So during this journey of you building really cool POCs and understanding customer pain points, I want to know, like, were there any big challenges and blockers that you see? Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Clean data is always the blocker
Yeah, yeah,
for
still
an
it
AI
is.
project, right?
Yeah.
People don't know where all their data is. They
Mm.
don't sort of think about how clean that data is and how they're going
Mhm.
to sustainably keep that data clean. But
Mm.
also, I think one of the hurdles is just the excitement sometimes blinds people to the business outcomes they are seeking. So
Right.
folks are so excited to hop on the train and do something with AI
Yeah.
that they're not thinking about, how do I find a solution for my problem? They're starting with
Mm.
the solution
Yeah.
and saying, how can we apply this? And
Mm.
that's backwards. Like, you have to come to the table with, this is the problem that I want to solve, and then figure
Right.
out how the technology is going to be a tool to get you from your problem to your solution,
Mm.
not the other way around.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think that is one of the biggest problems, is there's so many people that feel like they are under the gun to do something that is
Yeah.
innovative. They need to
Yeah.
do something. They need to say they're using AI somewhere to make their processes more
Absolutely.
efficient.
Yeah.
And I don't think people recognize that you can do that with almost anything, but you
Mm.
have to come to the table with the problem. You have to come to the table with the stakeholders that are involved. It can't just be you. You have to
Yeah.
come like the end user, the
Yeah.
people that are populating the data that you're going to use, and sort of make this a team effort. So,
Mm-hmm.
because the other problem you will have down the line if you don't do it that way is adoption. So if you're
Yes.
not building with your stakeholders as a part of that conversation,
Mm-hmm.
the build will get much more complex when you're already at the finish line, right? People are
Yeah.
going to be like, well, why didn't you do it this way? Or it's doing this, and I was
Mm.
expecting it to do that. And so you want to make sure that you have like a cohesive strategy where you're
Mm.
collaborating with other teams, so that when this thing does launch, people are going to use it and they know how
Mm-hmm.
to give feedback, because it's going to be an iterative process.
Right. Absolutely. And I think to add to that, a lot of times, AI is so broad. Like even a statistical model or some rule-based engine could be part of AI. And when you market it as, hey, I'm using AI, people always assume that you're using something like generative AI or something which is latest buzzword. But your solution might not need that. And it could be something as simple as a statistical model, which outperforms the LLM or maybe cost-wise or efficiency-wise. So it's really hard to market. And you just put it as AI, but people's conception of, okay, AI is generative AI or this LLM or something which is, uh, buzzing in the past 1 year. And it might not really be the need of the hour to solve that particular problem.
Definitely.
Mhm. Yeah. All right. Awesome. So we talked a lot about the awesome work you do and some blockers that you face, especially with clean data. I can't believe it's still an issue. It's been such a long time and we're still not able to fix the root cause of having clean, clean data. But I've also seen you participate a lot on in tech conferences and raising your voice as someone like women of color and representing that aspect, women in tech and whatnot. And I feel like there are very few women that I know are like so passionate about it and actually do something outside of their work for this. So talk us more about what made you. I know there is a gap that we see and feel, and which is why we raise our voice. But was there any personal experience that triggered you to participate more on this subject?
I guess just my own awareness of how many people are unaware of the
Mm,
opportunities that exist. So there is so much opportunity in this sector. And before I came to Boomi, I think I thought I knew, but I had only like scratched the surface
surface. Yeah.
of how many different types of opportunities there are to work in
Mm,
tech. And if you had asked me 5 years ago if I saw myself in a position like I have now, I would be
mm,
like, absolutely not. I mean,
mm,
coming into this role, it wasn't as intimidating because Boomi is a low code, no code platform. And to be clear, I am not a coder. That
mhm.
is not my life's calling, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people think about tech and they think about coding
Yeah.
and they think, I don't know, I'm too late to hop on that
Mm,
bandwagon. And
mm,
the reality is you're not too late, especially with the advancements in AI.
yeah.
Um, you would have to learn some things so you can check the AI. Let me say that.
Mm,
You definitely are not going to be able to
yeah.
rely on it to do the coding for you. You still have to
Yeah.
be smarter than the AI to know to
Absolutely.
check it. However, I
Hmm.
think the learning curve is a lot faster. I think the resources that are out there for people to scale up, if that is what they want to do, all those resources are there and they are free. Um, I
Mm,
think the other thing is that you don't have to be that person. So, like, I am walking proof that you can work in tech and be successful without being
absolutely.
a highly technical person. So,
Mm,
there's a very big need for folks who are marketers, who like talking to people, right? Who want to understand the customer journey and make
right.
sure that what the folks who are coding,
Mm,
what they're making is serving the need of the end user, and that the way in which you utilize that technology is being clearly communicated so that even if it's filling that need, if people don't
mm,
know how to use it, it's
yeah.
not that need, right?
Absolutely.
So I was at a product conference recently where somebody was talking about product communications, like product marketing,
Hmm.
and they were saying people don't buy the tool they need. People buy the tool they understand the fastest.
Absolutely.
And so that takes folks who have the mind to
Yeah.
understand how to speak the language of the end user, whoever
Mm,
that is. And
yeah.
so for me, getting up and advocating for more people who look like me, women,
Mm,
women of color,
mm,
um, is really about the fact that I just don't think people understand the opportunities that they could be taking advantage of. And that's
mm,
all I'm really trying to voice.
mhm,
I have been in a lot of spaces in my life where I am the only. I've gone to predominantly white institutions from a very young
mm.
age. And so I would like to be around more folks who look like me, not wholly, right? But I
Yeah.
think diversity is
Right.
really important. And I'm in a position where I am advocating for innovation.
Mm,
Innovation born out of diversity of thought is what
Mm-hmm.
creates something new. When you have multiple perspectives in the room, when you
Absolutely.
see something differently than everyone has seen it before, that is
Mm-hmm.
how you innovate. And so part of it is also like you want these diverse perspectives because that's what's going to push innovation. And
Mm-hmm.
also, that's what's going to create inclusion. It doesn't take much of a search to find that a lot of the AI has been built with innate biases. How do
Absolutely.
we overcome that? The people who are
Yeah,
being biased against have to be a part of the building process. Like you
exactly.
have to have those voices in the room. You have to have those people at the table. And so I personally would love to see that corrected. I've been
Mm.
waiting since my youth for the technology to come out. If you've ever seen the movie Clueless, so she
Yeah.
has this computer
Yes.
program where she's like picking out her clothes in
Mm.
the closet, right?
Yeah.
So there have been programs recently that have been released that do just that. I've been waiting my whole adult life for this technology. The one that I decided to test
Mm-hmm.
only had very, very thin white and Asian females that you could try the clothes onto.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to myself, well, if I can't upload myself, the body type of these women is not my body type. So
Yeah.
this is not going to tell me anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so minute example, and also I guess not important in the grand scheme of things. Do I need to be able to pick out my clothes from my computer? No. But I
Yeah.
think just for a tangible sort of example,
Mm.
these are the places, like it's not that anybody had any ill intent, they just weren't thinking about it. And so
Absolutely.
if you have more diverse people at the table, it puts it at the forefront of the
Mm.
conversation is can everyone even at this table use this technology?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good starting point.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many things that you put in such a nice way, which I feel and relate to. For example, like, I think that women have that imposter syndrome, something that I've also experienced, and a lot of women experience that if you're in a room, in a meeting or in a conference, you're always hesitant. Let's say you're not the most technical person in the room, but you understand technology, you know how to market it. And that's such an important skill to have, which I don't want to generalize, but essentially a lot of technical folks may or might not have. But they still feel like, oh, I don't know how to code, or I don't know the latest math behind this RAG approach or AI agents or something of that sort. And they just don't speak up and they don't ask questions. And I've seen male counterparts ask really basic questions with confidence. And nobody really looks at you. And it's such a surprising fact that women always have this imposter syndrome, which is kind of getting mitigated by all these initiatives that you and I are doing, and many other amazing women are doing. So I'm happy to see that growth. But also another point that you mentioned about products, it's not just AI. Like look at even the car seats that we have. They are also designed primarily for male body type. And it's everything. I've been in meetings where, again, full predominantly male dominated, and they talk about, hey, when the user comes, he will click on this button. And it's just like so organic that you tend to say he. And I mean, I have also done that mistake. And I've really contemplated and realized, okay, even in the flow of on a train of thought, I also assume it's a he, not a she, or like have some general neutral term use. But it's just like so organic and so part of our lives that we don't realize even us women do that. So it needs to really change. The system has to change. It is making progress, but we have a long way to go. So I'm glad we are taking our small steps to help this cause. So thank you for sharing those thoughts.
Yeah, me too. And as we recently learned at a conference, Anthropic Claude is a female. The
Yes.
future is female. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Agreed. So, I mean, I just want to ask you a little bit more. I mean, you briefly touched upon it, and we are trying to, go to these conferences and advocate for this. But any other advice you would give younger women starting their careers? You briefly mentioned, like, programming or coding or being technical is not the only career choice, and there are so many other available options. But any other advice for young women starting their careers in tech? What would you say?
get a mentor or get many mentors, if
Yeah.
I'm honest. So this is not specific to technology. I think this is just the workforce in general. Book smarts will get you only but so far.
Yeah.
What's really going to get your foot in the door at the end of the day
Mm.
is experience, hands-on experience, and
Mm-hmm.
also knowing people who can vouch for your work,
Yeah.
people who can say, I have seen her build a thing, or I have seen
Mm.
her explain this concept, or I have seen her start and finish a project. That seems very simple, but a lot of
Yeah.
people start projects that they never finish.
Yeah.
And so if you can have somebody that can advocate for you when you are
Mm.
not in the room, that is invaluable. That is absolutely priceless. And I also think with mentoring, those folks are going to teach you things that would take you years to learn
To
on
learn by
your own.
yourself.
It's like a
Yeah.
cheat sheet, right?
Yeah.
I've been very lucky to have some really great mentors and some really great champions in my career,
Mm.
which have allowed me to pivot, which have allowed me to try new things. I mentor. So if you are in tech, I would advise you or implore you to give back. So I mentor
Absolutely.
a project called Anita B.
Mm.
I
Yes.
have a young female that I'm mentoring that is graduating from Brown University with her undergraduate degree. And we have conversations all the time that don't have anything to do with tech. So she's
Yeah.
graduating with a computer science degree. She's going
Mm.
into technology. But there are other questions that she has about being in the workforce and what it's like to navigate career
Mm-hmm.
that aren't specific to tech.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just say seek out some older folks in your circles, ask your parents. Like if you're a
Yeah.
young person, ask your parents, ask your professors. And don't be afraid to just reach out to people. Like folks love to be an expert. I actually made a friend through LinkedIn, but
Mm-hmm.
actually how I found her was on a podcast. She was being
Mm.
interviewed on a podcast. I don't know the person that was doing the podcast.
Right.
I was listening,
Mm.
and she was talking about doing design thinking for municipalities. So, like, how do you
Mm.
apply these concepts to a usually quite rigid system when you're talking about like local government?
Right.
And I was like, this is fascinating. And she started her
Mm.
career in the music industry. And so
Wow.
she's talking about the music industry. She
Yeah.
pivoted into design thinking. She was doing work on her own. At the time, I was like working on my own portfolio because that
Mm.
was what I was teaching my students to do. And I said I would never ask them to do something I hadn't done myself. So I was like,
Right.
I want you to do a portfolio. So let me make
Mm-hmm.
a portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So I reached out to this woman cold on LinkedIn. I sent her, when I sent the request, I added a note and I said, I heard you on this podcast and a lot of the things that you said resonated with me. We have very similar backgrounds. I would be
Mm.
really interested to have a conversation if you're open to it. And her and I continued to have a series of calls where we helped each
Wow.
other with our portfolios and talked about experiences we had had.
Mm.
And that was really because I just thought to myself, I would like to know this person.
Right.
And there's no harm in sending the message because worst case scenario,
They're
she
not
doesn't
gonna
respond
accept. Yeah. Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah.
Um, so like just don't be afraid to reach out to people. You never know
Mm-hmm.
when you'll get a response and then what you'll learn from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they say, right, like your net worth is your network or something like that, which I feel is actually true. Like at some point, I mean, the books and the technical knowledge are only going to take you so far. Like you need to have those skills, all-rounder skills, like good communication, building a good network and people who can advocate for you, like you said. So yeah, those skills people don't realize the importance at 19, 20, or when they're starting off their careers. And it's nice to have a mentor who can teach you these skills early on so that you don't take 10 years to learn those skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to ask you, I know you've talked about things that you're excited about at work and how interesting your work is, but are there particular things that excite you, not just at work, but in general? And something could be apart from AI, like anything that you feel like, I see this technology or this thing going to change the world in the next 2, 3 years, something that excites you.
Technology or something that is going to change the world. Um,
It could be fear also, like, is it
I know you said it
excitement
doesn't
or
have to be
fear?
AI,
Yeah,
but
I know.
the thing that I think is changing the world really
Is
is
AI.
the everyday use of these AI tools.
Mm-hmm.
And so even just thinking about like Chat GPT or like Perplexity, I use both
Mm,
on my phone every day. I ask the same question to both to sort of see like
mm,
what kind of response I'm going to get back.
mm-hmm.
Personally, I really love Perplexity because it actually gives me links to its sources, which is really nice.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I just think about how I used to be really adamant about Googling everything. And so when
Mm,
I would go to the store, I still do this
mm.
sometimes. When I go to the store, I'm like, do I want to buy this exact product? And then you like quickly Google
Yeah.
it on your phone. And you're like, what are the
Yeah.
reviews?
Yeah.
Right. And so with AI, it's not just about Googling things, right? Like you can get
Mm,
answers. It's not a search function. It's like
mm.
an answer function, which is different.
Right.
Um, and so I think what excites me the most about this technology is like how much more efficient we're all going to be in our regular lives, but
Mm,
also how much more efficient we're going to be at work. And so
Right.
I don't think AI is going to replace us. I think it's just going to make
Hmm.
us way more efficient. And my hoped outcome is that the 4-day work week will become real. We're all going to be so
Yes,
efficient at our jobs. We don't have to
absolutely.
work full work days. We don't have to
Mm.
work full work weeks. Like we can
Yeah.
get great amounts of work done and move our businesses forward and move society forward and
Mm.
move the economy forward. But we can still make
Hmm.
time and make more time for the
Right.
things that really matter, right? Like spending
Mm.
time with your family, nurturing hobbies, like loving on your
Mm.
pets if you have pets, and all of these things that like we a little bit have time to do now, but they really
But yeah,
enrich our lives. And so I'm really excited for watching technology allow us to get our time back.
have more work-life balance.
Yes.
Hmm. And do you see, like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people and guests have said that they are very excited about AI and how it's going to ease up our job. But there's also a trend that I've noticed recently. Like, you expect the AI to do a lot and it doesn't do, you get frustrated. There was a paper which talked about things that people actually write to Chat GPT, like, hey, you're so dumb, you can't do this. And like frustration and anger. Like, I mean, sure, AI is easing up your life, but are you becoming too dependent on AI for every little thing? Is that something that I have fear and I've seen, I try to control myself to ask everything to Chat GPT because I don't want to, forget basic coding or basic things that I used to do before. So is that something that you also fear or think that could happen?
Um, I do have a little bit of a fear for that, only because I look at this generation that's coming up behind us, and they are so dependent on their mobile devices.
Mm.
They are over connected, if you will, to the point
Yeah.
where I'm not even sure they really know how to carry conversation in real
Face to
life,
face. Yeah. Yeah.
which will take you far. Going back to the networking piece, right?
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
have to do some of this in-person communication. And I think if we were to become really dependent on some of this AI, my
Mm.
fear, and I heard a podcast about this the other day, my fear is that people will start turning to AI for companionship. And there
Yes.
are things that the AI just like cannot replace. I don't
Yeah.
care like how theoretical you can get with Claude to have these
Mm.
conversations, and sometimes that is needed. But I think there's a part of us that needs human connection, that needs real life
Absolutely.
connection. And I don't want to lose that in in this obsession with technology. Like
Mm.
technology, like I said, I want the technology to free us up to spend more time with people. And so
Exactly.
as I look around and I see how much time, not even just young people, I think just people in
Hmm.
general are spending on video games, like not to sound like my grandmother, but like it's a lot of screen time. And
Absolutely.
so I fear that we will not be able to like pull away from
Mm.
all of the things that technology can do for us, to remember that also the world in general outside has a lot to
Right.
offer. Go for
Right.
a walk, do
Mm.
some gardening, get some
Yeah.
sunlight.
Yeah. Absolutely. You said it very well. I think it is a trend that I've observed with younger generation more because, like you said, that instant gratification thanks to social media, you get things done, even like delivery apps or things which have made our mindset, getting things done very quickly. You need the ROI. I have conversations with younger people and they said, okay, if I invest 1 year of my life, is it going to help me for the next 10 years? And I'm like, you're even before starting to look at the problem or working towards it, you have this mindset of maximum ROI and bare minimum effort, which really, I mean, people have just forgotten like how important hard work is. And that really scares me for the future.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. It's so funny. I think about like in school, they used to tell us you can't use your calculator on the test because it's not like you're going to have calculators everywhere you go,
Right.
and then it's like you pick up your phone, like, haha, I showed you, I do have a calculator everywhere I go. But I do think it's important to be able to do basic math. Like if I
Right.
were to leave my cell phone in the car, like, can I calculate the tip on something? Like,
Yeah,
absolutely, I can do that stuff by myself. And what it comes back to is just like, we have to continue to be smarter than the technology. Like,
absolutely.
we have to be able to check what the technology is saying to us. And
Mm.
so if we're not taking the time to learn, there's also,
Yeah.
I listen to too many podcasts. I was listening to this other podcast the other day that was talking about how kids are not paying attention in school.
Mm.
So like
Yeah.
essentially like, I don't know how to say this nicely, but they were sort of saying it's like the dumbing of generations behind us
Yeah.
because they are on their phones
All the
constantly in the
time.
classroom. And so they're
Yes.
not paying attention. So they're not learning anything when they're in the
Mm.
classroom. And like that is really alarming because, like I
Yeah.
said, if they don't know enough to fact check. What does that
Mm,
mean for everything, for getting a
absolutely.
job and doing a job correctly, for voting, right?
Yes.
We're in an election year.
Mm,
Um, it's it's scary to think that young people are not taking the time to sit down and say, okay, I need to focus in this time and I
mm,
can put the phone away for the next
yeah,
hour and I can check it in between classes. Like
absolutely.
alarming.
It is. It is. I've seen, and to add on that, like there is like a lot of context switching that happens, which is not really helpful for you to focus and get things done. Like you start on one project and you're like, okay, some random thing. What is, I want to buy a shoe for my birthday or some random thing. And you switch on that and then you forget the task you were doing. And that there, it's so fascinating that, when we were growing up and in my college, I remember you had to like sit and code for hours. And that was not a big deal for us because we used to really enjoy the process of mental stimulation, improving our cognitive skills, and learning something. We would never even think of some random things. And that is so common in today's generation. Like they can't sit for even 20 minutes and focus and do something, which is, yeah, a scary thing.
Attention space of a fly, just
Yeah.
constant stimulation from all the places. And
Mm,
I don't know, there was a time in my life where I thought multitasking was what was going to make me more productive. If I could do all the things at once. But the
no.
reality is, like, you're not doing anything well if you're not dedicating your attention to that single task.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to learn that.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping maybe some folks are watching this that I'm speeding up the
Yeah.
learning curve. And like multitasking is not getting you to the end faster.
I mean, it depends on the quality of like what task you're doing. If it's something that use like, muscle memory, for example, if you're cooking omelet every morning and you're talking to your mom or something, that is
Yeah.
something, of course, you can multitask, but something which needs really good focus, that is not supposed to be divided. Anyway, well, those were all my questions. I do have a last section. It's lightning round, and I'm going to ask you some questions, and you have to answer them as fast as possible. No pressure.
Okay. No pressure.
All right. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
My dad told me when I was a kid, you make your own luck. And he's right.
Mm,
So like what he meant by that is if an opportunity were to present itself, but you're not ready, you
yeah.
can't take advantage of that. And that has proven true so many times in my life.
Mm. Always be prepared.
Always be prepared.
Mm. Love it. Name a book for you. I'm going to say book or podcast that has had significant impact on your career.
Is it a cop out if I say my phone book? I feel like it always comes back to people. I feel like
Yeah.
the thing that's had the most impact on my career is just like network.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Could be anything. Awesome. What's one innovation in technology that you can't live without?
GPS.
Yeah, I agree. I would be lost, even for 0.1 miles.
I remember using like physical maps that were in the glove box of our car as a
Yeah.
kid. And I'm like, how did anybody
How?
do this? Now I'm like, I just don't understand how anybody could function without
Oh
GPS to
my
tell
God.
you the exact time to turn, right?
Right.
Like there's so many streets and you're like, is it this one or is it this one? Like
Yeah.
I
Even
just
the stop signs, the red. It was not there like a year ago, and now I'm like, oh my God, how did I function without it? Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Good answer. What's your biggest inspiration? Like, sorry, who is your biggest inspiration in tech industry?
Hmm. In the tech industry specifically, that's a tough
Maybe,
one.
maybe in just the workforce or somebody you look up to
Um,
apart from your family.
well, I saw a commencement speech by the woman who co-founded or who founded Girls Who Code. I think her
Mm,
name is Reshma Sojani, I think is her last name. That was really powerful. She did this whole speech on imposter syndrome. If you have
mm,
not seen this, you
I
must find it.
will.
I think it was
I
the
will.
commencement speech for Smith College a year
Mm.
or two ago. But it was so good. And I think what she's doing with Who Code is
Code, yeah.
amazing. And so I
Mm.
think that would probably be my answer if I had to pick someone specifically in tech.
Awesome. Awesome. I will check that out. If you had to describe your work style in one word, what would that be?
Collaborative. There is not a
Awesome.
day that goes by that I'm not pinging
Awesome.
somebody who is way smarter than me to be like, how do you do this thing? Can you explain this to me like every day?
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. What's your favorite productivity tool or app?
Google Calendar.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I know that I also have a habit. Even if a friend is asking me, hey, let's catch up. Hey, can you send me a Google Calendar invite? Because
No,
I'm just going to forget it.
if I showed you my Google Calendar, you would be like, what is happening here? It's color coded. Like,
Oh, wow.
because there's just so much stuff going on. And so
Mm.
I definitely could not live
Function
without it.
without it.
There's no way I could keep my calendar in my head.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could have dinner with any historic figure, or again, like anybody you look up to, who would that be?
Historic figure, I'd probably say Maggie Walker.
Mm.
So this is
Uh,
actually like specific to where I live. So I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
mm-hmm.
Maggie L. Walker was the first president, female president of a bank. She also happened to
Mm.
be African American. So to say that like
Wow.
the first president of a bank who was a female was also Black in that time, we're talking
Mm.
about the turn of the century, is
Wow.
wild beyond my
It
beliefs.
is. Yeah.
So I think it would be so fascinating to have dinner with her and just like hear her tell her story, but also to talk about how this particular city has
Mm.
changed
Mm-hmm.
over the years and the things that I have seen versus the things that she had seen. I
Mm-hmm.
think that would be really fascinating.
Wow. I did not know about her. Thank you for sharing that.
Send you some resources.
Mm. Love it. Do you have any hidden talent or hobby that you would like to share with the audience? It could be anything.
I play ukulele, but
I
it's
do
hidden on
too.
purpose because I'm not very good.
Yeah.
Hobby more than it is a talent. I
Mm.
enjoy it. I am a petite person and I've tried to play guitar and I can't reach the chords.
Mm-hmm.
So, ukulele is just like a baby sized guitar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I try. I'm not great. My poor husband has listened to me play the same like four songs on repeat, trying to get better.
We
It's a
should
work
do a
in
jam
progress.
session. I do play the guitar too, but I'm also not very good. And I do the same with my husband. I'm like, hey, do you want to listen to a song? And he's like, is it Zombie Cranberry? I'm like, yeah, but I have a new variation this time. And it's like maybe another chord, but yeah, it's fun.
It is. It
Ukulele
is.
is fun. It's definitely fun. And looks cuter too. So yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. Um, if you weren't in the tech industry, is there anything if you had to imagine something else apart from the tech industry, where would you be?
I have an answer for this. I would love to do voiceovers for Disney.
Oh,
So
wow.
every time I watch, or like Pixar, every time I watch an animated movie, I think to myself, I
I
could do
can
this. Like
I
I
can
could be the
see,
voice behind that
yeah.
character.
I can
Like
actually
that'd
see
be
that because your voice, I can imagine you being Rapunzel or something.
all right. So I'm putting it out to this network because I haven't found anybody in my network to help me make this come true. So if somebody's watching this and you
Mm,
know someone that works for Disney that is looking for people to do voiceovers, I can make myself be available for that opportunity.
wow. Love it. Love it. I would have asked you to do like just maybe a teaser or something, but yeah, I would not put the spotlight on you like that. But
I'm not
yeah.
prepared. I'm not prepared.
Wow, that's an interesting hobby. I've never heard of it. Interesting choice of career. Very nice. Um, Last thing before we wrap up, anything you would like to share with the audience as a takeaway about the conversation we had, or just in general that you would like to share?
The biggest takeaway is just like be open. Be open to the possibilities of how your career can change, of how
Mm,
your life can change, right? When you're talking about like AI and innovation, like don't be afraid to try things. Don't be afraid to learn something new because you
hmm.
just never know where that will lead.
Yeah, agreed. And then looking at your career as an example is great to watch and learn.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Love it. Thank you. Thank you, Patricia, for sharing. It was lovely chatting with you as always. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. This has been super fun.
Thank you. Bye.